A last-minute meeting between Canada Post and the union representing 55,000 postal workers is taking place tonight. The CUPW requested to meet with a mediator before the midnight Eastern strike deadline. Sarah Galashan is watching all of the developments on this. And this meeting, is this a positive sign in terms of the strike deadline?
I mean, it could certainly be a positive sign, but whether or not this in any way mitigates what could possibly happen as of 12:01 Friday a.m., that's very, it seems unlikely, and certainly it's uncertain, because if you consider the fact that back in December, what happened was there was a strike and the postal workers were ordered back to work for a period of time until May 22nd, and that's when that extension was going to expire. So in the mind of the union, as we understand it, they see it, and I think that it is true that they are still technically on strike as of midnight. Now, what that job action actually looks like, we have heard from union reps that it might not be a full strike that they would entertain, that it might be some kind of rotating strike or a different kind of a job action. But the fact that the meeting, which has been agreed to now by both Canada Post, we understand, and as well the union, we don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but sometime in the next now under 4 hours. We wait to see what comes of it, but the fact that that meeting's happening just in itself does not appear to be something that will necessarily affect what happens at midnight.
Yeah, but you got to think it's not bad news that the two sides would say it's even worth going to the table at this point. And imagine the pressure as you're at that table and you're looking at the clock on the wall and seeing the hours tick down to midnight Eastern time. So the union had asked for, I think, what they described as a 2-week truce to kind of cool things down. Canada Post didn't want to do that.
Well, the 2-week truce, they said, was because they had this new document that was given to them on Tuesday, the new offer by Canada Post, described as being, well, certainly at least more than 100 pages long, so lots of detail, fine print, that they said they needed that time to go through. But Canada Post has said no to that, and while it is something that could be allowed under the labour law, thereby leaving them still in a possible strike situation at the end of that 2 weeks, Canada Post said the uncertainty was simply too costly for them, and a spokesperson for the corporation was speaking earlier today about that. I want to play you what he said.
Anybody who ships anything in Canada had May 22nd circled on the calendar as a day to avoid Canada Post, regardless. If we were in this situation, if they're a large company, would move all their material out of Canada Post, and that they have done, and they moved to the competition. Or if you're a small business or somebody wanting to ship something, you aren't sending it to Canada Post, and a 2-week reprieve was not going to help that in any way, shape, or form. So in some of our facilities, our volumes are down by 2/3. So when we're already facing an existential crisis, we can't just keep kicking things down the road.
The position of Canada Post is that these discussions, there has been a 32-day strike in this, but the discussions have been going on for 2 years. So they say that this has certainly been enough time that this shouldn't require a 2-week pause to necessarily go through this. They also believe that this is an offer that should lead to negotiations that could then end any job action while those negotiations are taking place. But the union has earlier, just last night, on Wednesday, put out a number of points to their members about failings, things that are not being met that they had been asking for, and one of them being wages. 13% is now the offer, a rise over 4 years from management to the union, but the union has been asking for 19%.
Not a good sign, I don't think, when management describes a labor dispute as an existential crisis. I mean, it shows how big the stakes are here. Sarah, thank you.
You bet.
Our next guest is worried about how a long-term postal strike could affect his business. John Barrett is Director of Sales, Marketing and Development at Vesey Seeds, and he joins us now from York, Prince Edward Island. And so how will your business be affected if this strike goes ahead in a few hours?
Well, our business has already been affected just with the threat of the strike looming. Someone just mentioned that May 22nd was circled on the calendar. Well, we circled May 1st on our calendar because we couldn't run the risk of not being able to find alternate sources for delivery. And so we've shifted all of our parcel delivery, which for the better part of 86 years, we've depended upon Canada Post to deliver the parcels to our customers. But we've had no other choice than to shift all of our delivery to a competing company. Now, where we have a problem, of course, is in a couple of weeks' time when we have to mail another couple of 100,000 catalogs. And unfortunately, there is no alternate source for us to be able to distribute catalogs to addresses in Canada. So this has been very disruptive for some time, and it's caused concern and hesitation by our customers because we are, after all, a mail order company.
I remember Vesey seeds coming to my parents' place growing up. It's been a big part of a lot of people's lives for a long time. So you've gone to alternate ways of delivering the seeds. Will you come back to Canada Post in the future?
I think that's yet to be determined. That's a bigger discussion that we have to have internally. But, you know, we've had such a good relationship with Canada Post, despite the numerous numbers of strikes and labor disruptions that we've, suffered through over the years. Really, we have no choice other than to deal with Canada Post when it comes to letter mail delivery. But because of our size and the large number of orders that we do ship over the course of the year, Canada Post's competitors have really sharpened their pencil, and they're very anxious to have our business.
Interesting to hear you talk about catalogs because they have become much smaller a part of our lives than they were years ago. How is it, like a lot of people have gone to ordering things online, but catalogs, it sounds like, are still really important for Vesey's seeds? Well,
it's the nature of the gardening world. If you're going to order a laptop, you might go online and you have a choice of 5 or 6 laptops to choose from, and you look at price and, RAM and all of these sorts of things. But in the case of our situation, where we might have, well over 3,000 different SKUs within the catalog, a gardener needs the time to sit down, leaf through the pages of the catalog, read the descriptions, the prices, the germination rates, all of these sorts of things with regards to the seeds, circle them in the catalog, and then eventually order. Now, probably 88% of all of our orders come into us on the internet. However, people have been buying on the internet, but they've been shopping using the printed catalog. So in the case of the gardening world and all of our competitors in that market space, the printed catalog is still vitally important.
You are a classic mail order business, kind of a throwback in a way, from the catalogs to actually mailing out the seeds to your customers. What is your message tonight for Canada Post, both the company and the union?
Well, I think, I'm encouraged by the news that I've just heard that they're meeting tonight, but, it's too little too late. After a year and a half of very expensive and painful negotiations that have been going on, it doesn't appear that the union leadership is listening to Canada Post. I mean, you have a corporation that's losing upwards of $1 billion a year, yet the staff members are coming to the manager and saying, I need a raise, I need more days off. No, we don't want you to hire extra people so that you can deliver on the weekend. I mean, it's 2025. Things have changed. Customers' expectations have changed. Delivery methods have changed. And it's time that the union sees that there are required changes in order for Canada Post to continue into the next decade. From a corporation standpoint, from what I see and what I read, I think they've been fair in the sort of changes that they're instituting in order to save the corporation. And so it seems like people just aren't listening. And, I'm not convinced that the membership is fully supportive, perhaps, of yet another strike. This is not a new strike. This is simply a continuation of the old strike. And so they didn't have to go back to membership in order to get a vote in order to walk off the job tonight at midnight. So I think perhaps they might start by talking to their memberships a little bit more.
Well, a lot is riding on this for the workers, for the company, and then for people like you at Vesey's. John, thanks for speaking with us this evening.
No, thank you for having me.
John Barrett is the Director of Sales, Marketing and Development at Vesey's Seeds and P.E.I. To break down what a postal strike might look like and how long it will last, we're joined by Sundeep Gokhale. Sundeep is a labor and employment lawyer and a partner at Sherrod Coos, and he joins us now from Toronto. So if the two sides aren't able to come to a resolution by midnight, just a few hours from now, are we likely to see a full strike, do you think, or rotating strikes?
Well, there's a couple of things that could happen, and there's a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, the union may say, although we're in a legal strike position, we're not going to actually commence a strike. Somewhere in the middle would be something we call the rolling strike, which is parts of the country would go on strike and there would be a systematic stoppage of work just to cause a bit of disruption, but not an entire halt of delivery services. And then on the other end of the spectrum is what we saw in December, in January, which was a full out work stoppage coast to coast where all operations, where all employees ceased performing services. So it's one of those three options or somewhere in between.
Yeah, so the union, as you know, asked for a 2-week pause here to study the details of Canada Post's agreement. Canada Post said, no, this corporation's facing an existential crisis, so we've got to make some moves now. So if there were rotating strikes, does that suggest to you that Canada Post might decide to lock out its employees?
They may, and that's exactly, they would be in a legal position to do so upon 72 hours notice. So they absolutely can, and I think that's where the union has to be pretty measured in its approach right now, because if they do simply lock them out, are they then inviting the government to get back involved and perhaps send this to binding arbitration like we saw, with the rail folks as well as the ports?
So we had a postal strike about 6 months ago. The government stepped in and said, "Okay, let's end this just days before Christmas. Let's put a pause on it." And now we're on the verge, perhaps, of another strike. Why has this dispute been so difficult to resolve?
Well, I think the challenges are so fundamental in terms of the operations and the dire financial need of Canada Post. Your last guest laid it out perfectly in terms of the challenges, the drop in services, and the lack of the ability to compete with private providers that Amazon contracts with and some of the other players in the industry. And I think the commissioners, the report that was issued last Thursday by a well-renowned neutral William Kaplan laid it out perfectly. The Canada Post is on the brink of insolvency. For the longest time, Canada Post operated without taxpayer dollars. That changed this year with a $1 billion loan from the federal government. And so the situation is so dire, and there has to be fundamental change. And the issue is the union just doesn't want to participate in some of that fundamental change that needs to happen. And all of that was laid out in Kaplan's report last week, where he highlighted the need for dynamic delivery. He highlighted the need for not moving away or phasing out daily delivery to persons, but keeping daily delivery for businesses, and the need for weekend work and the use of part-time employees to adapt to some of the fluctuations in deliveries. And so it was all laid out in that report, and now Canada Post is saying, well, that's exactly what we're trying to get through the negotiation process.
We have less than a minute left, but last time around, the strike happened just before the holiday rush or during, I guess, the holiday rush. And maybe that put pressure on the government to step in and put at least a temporary end to the labor dispute. This time around, if the strike begins, do you think the government will step in, and what would it take for them to do that?
Well, they didn't step in to this extent that they did in other industries. And so I think they're going to give the parties a bit of leeway here before they actually step in. But it's going to be a short leash. And I think we're talking weeks, not months, in terms of if it is a full-blown work stoppage before the government steps in.
Sundeep, thank you very much for your analysis.
Anytime.
Sundeep Gokhale is a labor and employment lawyer.